creating themselves and increasing the level of complexity beyond the ability of management to occur. So here we are at this stage. New World Order is finding itself rubbing up against all kinds of boundaries and problems in the complexity world. It's a very unique time. With the breakaway civilization, it might actually be possible to get these guys to a table to sit down and understand reality and make a deal that they would live with and actually be quite happy to live with, because the bastards are desperate. They see no out. It's because of their perception that's caused that. They are perceiving the world and universe in such a way that they've literally built a wall around their own perception and are unable to see the various different alternatives that present themselves continuously to the conundrum in which they find themselves. Now, that having been said, these guys are many of them are likely tainted by their experiences, if not by actual mind control, who's-he-was-its from aliens or who the hell knows what. And the complexity of this can't be understated or unappreciated. But I think there actually is a mechanism whereby the complexities of our particular positions, the regular humans suffering as slaves, and those who would claim themselves our masters, could be merged back into a more harmonious whole. A lot of people would say that that's particularly naive, but there's a lot of reasons that I have to understand that we're at a unique point in history and a unique time that may allow this to occur. There's very few months that it could possibly occur. This window of opportunity probably fades dramatically in less than a year. And but during this period of time, we're going to, according to our work here at Half Past Human and the remote viewers at farsight.org and so on, we're going to hit a complexity wall that is going to shift everything in a single short period of time. We can call it a geological instant if we want, but for humans it might be a series of weeks. Nonetheless, though, it'll be one of these things where giant Sandy kind of Katrina Rita storm effect hits us all, and the world is changed for everybody, including the breakaway civilization. Because without us in a good, healthy, functioning system, they suffer, and they're suffering now. The world has gone batshit crazy with the tribal bankers taking everything they possibly can out of the system in a wholesale rape and pillage, because they are uncontrolled at the moment. But the trend that was set in place with the bankers being the ticks that are sucking all of the blood out of us and so forth was created by the New World Order shadow government guys. They just don't know how to stop that trend once they put it into place, and that has led, they couldn't control the process. Once they corrupted the individuals and corruption was in their soul, there was no stopping on them. There was no, because there's no outside moral authority or internal moral boundaries. Once they had corrupted these individuals, they just did as nature bid them, as they have been trained to, and have bled the system to this state and totally screwed it over. Also, the nature in which the systems are being bled so rapidly, independent of the Wall Street guys going batshit, tells me that the desperation of the New World Order, the desperation of the shadow breakaway guys is quite acute, and that they are indeed suffering great losses because we guys are having to support that part of the war. We're losing. The New World Order guys are losing. The shadow breakaway guys are losing. The breakaway civilization is losing the war, and we're having to have more of our blood, sweat, and tears sucked out of us. That's why our social order is so poor. That's why the instant poverty around all of the planet. At its core, that money is disappearing. The things that money represents, the metals, the foods, the energy, are disappearing from the surface world and going into the shadow breakaway world. And they are not returning. That's why we are in this state of increasing poverty. Yeah, there's designs and there's corruption in the system. There's also systemic collapse, and all of the other things are absolutely true. But at a very high level, the shit's disappearing off the planet, people, and that stuff's got to be going somewhere. So, and we used to have that stuff here, and we used to use it, and we can't use it anymore. So that's why we're so poor. Our resources are going away. This obviously can't continue. Well, we know universe, by the way, from our viewpoint, is going to come along and bitch slap all of us, and this over this next 5 or 6 months, and that won't continue because the slaves will be so devastated that they won't be able to produce. There's a real interesting dynamic here that you can relate to in two ways. Let's relate it to first as slaves and then as mercenaries, and both of these are historically accurate. A large civilization that is very flat pyramid shape, not the usual 45 to 51 degree angles, but something much more acute, where you have a very tiny group of people at the top of a very wide flat pyramid. That tiny group of people is extremely dependent upon the health of that pyramid below them. And if you are dependent on a slave population and a disease were to come through and devastate your slave population, even if none of the elite were touched by that disease, they too are devastated because their standard of living falls with each and every death of every slave, up to the point that there's a certain criticality. They don't care, but that criticality can be very easily at the very low level of their flattened pyramid. So you take out the bottom two layers and they're done, because there isn't enough human population to support them in the way that they need, not necessarily have been accustomed to, but the way that they need, especially as their needs are now growing, in that they're basically throwing all of our energy and stuff in this war against these extraterrestrial bastards off planet. So, that being the case, they are in a world of hurt. Their desperation is coming through loud and clear, both in terms of how bad they're bleeding us, and also the language that is infiltrating itself into our consciousness slowly at the point that the secret shadow government interacts with the minion world. And there's all kinds of official documents. If you wanted to go to the trouble like we do, you can go and track the changes in language in these official documents over time. You get a very weird perspective of the planet as a result of this. And you know that the shadow government guys, the breakaway guys, are indeed suffering from some level of malaise. I'm at the moment ascribing it to losing the war, but who knows what it actually is, because the level of complexity is rather large. And to a certain extent, the details do not matter. They are suffering at the level of complexity that puts us in this bind where our planet is going to hell. And part of the problem is that the slaves don't have the bigger picture, so many of our internal little bloop kind of actions are counterproductive to both our own interests over time as well as those of the people that claim to rule us. See, in the sense that, we might want to cooperate. We might want to fight this war with them. We don't know. We've never been offered the chance. If we were cooperating, it might be a little bit more like World War II instead of Vietnam. Okay, nobody wanted to cooperate with Vietnam, and there were bazillions of acts that sabotaged that continuously. World War II, it was a less of a issue that way. Those people that were against the war, who were awake and knew what was going on, merely did not participate. The social order would not allow active, even individual acts of defiance within that generation. That had changed by the time of the Vietnam War, where there were individual acts of defiance throughout that whole war, and everything was just one big screwed up mess from one thing to another. I'm telling you, people in logistics would, deliberately not deliver things, that sort of thing. So it was just a big bollocks, but it was socially supported because the invasion and everything. It was just a put up job from the beginning, and we all knew it at some level, and we're distinctly opposed to it all. Well, that's kind of where we're at now. You've got all of the people on the planet here totally oblivious to what's going on up above their heads, and as a result of which, all of us are making individual decisions that have collectively impacted the species and its reactions to and interactions with the breakaway part of the species that is desperate to survive this war. Now, if they lose, we may also lose as a species. We don't know. Maybe those guys are up there fighting, the slobbering, blood-sucking aliens. They're going to come down here and harvest us like cattle or rabbits or something. And, we'll be ending up being served on platters to these guys in some little dungeon somewhere, all sliced and diced. That may well be what they are fighting. If so, hey guys, I'll fight with you if that's the case. I don't care what kind of a bastard you are. The enemy of my racial or my species enemy is my friend. They're my cousin at that point. We can duke it out among ourselves afterwards. But in the meantime, it's human to human against the what is it? Can't think of the moment. The blood-sucking beasties from Ball Wart or whatever. In any event, though, we're not being offered a choice. And consciousness is an interesting thing. When consciousness has huge levels of dichotomies around it like this, certain things are forced out. If you as an individual have patterns in your life that you are refusing to deal with, that pattern becomes greater and greater and greater in amplification over time. The pattern still exists, the template still exists until you're forced to deal with it one way or another, or until the pattern kills you. Quite actually, we see this happen all the time to everybody. Unawareness of the life unexamined is a very dangerous life to live. This is also true at this point in complexity. So, and hey, here's something else to think about. It may be something as weird as this war in space that causes the global coastal event. In other words, one way to hit a planet really hard would be to just grab an asteroid and fling it on in. Or maybe it's one of these giant motherships that crashes in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that starts the whole process off. We don't know. Could even be some kind of a weapon that they've got planted down there. Again, another way to disrupt a planetary defense system would be to disrupt the planet, cause tectonic plate action to occur with your super-duper weapons that you've got that we don't know anything about. But we do know that they are acting as though we're at war with all of the TSA, Homeland Security crap here, and in the European areas, almost all of it, the areas that are really densely going fascist, though, are the Anglo core of the planet, and these guys have been at the forefront of the, let's say, Anglo-Teutonic and dealing with the space aliens, so I suspect that's the case since all the rumors exist. The language goes back that far, as in the 1920s, of contact between the, actually even before that. I mean, there's evidence in the 1500s from the John Dee period that the Brits and the, especially the royals, were attempting to contact extraterrestrials. Flat out. That's what they were out to do. And indeed probably succeeded at some point. I mean, if you've been trying for that many centuries and you don't give it up, hey, I bet you there was success along the way. So anyway, this is where we find ourselves. Complexity is increasing to a huge level. The complexity that has hit universe is increasing at the little bloop level. This is an infinite universe because it's going to continue blooping out atoms and stuff ad infinitum, as far as I know, eternally. And so the universe will keep growing, but it is not as the big bangers would have you understand it. And so each of the little bloops needs to become basically aware of its participation in its role in the greater consciousness of bloopdom that is universe, because the breakaway guys are in a real world of hurt. The New World Order, and insofar as the Anglo language-centric empire, is not going down easily. It's going to go down. I mean, we know that there's going to be fairly large, or we suspect that here at Half Past Human there's going to be a fairly large derivative explosion, not an implosion, but an explosion. I suspect early in January. The data we have seems to suggest that it'll occur before Obama gets his next chance to flub the swearing in. So that, I don't know, what is that, the 20th of January? So sometime between now and the 20th of January, there's going to be this explosion of a derivative that's going to cause a whole lot of problems, and there basically goes a big part of the financial system. It'll take another couple of months to dribble out, I think. In any event, if anybody knew how to profit off of overinflated bonds, you'd better do it now, because they're going to be non-existent, I think, after this derivative goes kablooey. The derivative somehow seems to be related to firehouses, fire hoses, firefighting. I don't know if it's a firefighting company, fires. It doesn't appear to be interest rate. It's just this weird thing. We get a lot of words that relate to firefighting. So, how that would relate to derivatives, I don't know, because I don't follow them in details, but I'm pretty sure the data source. In any event, we're there now. The complexity levels that I wanted to discuss here, well, I'll get into the complexity and how it affects chakras and how the energy comes on in, and that actually all relates to where we're at now, because these guys don't understand these things, and because the New World Order types, the shadow government guys, maybe at the very top there are scientists within the shadow government world that know all this stuff that I know, that can see some of the things that us batshit regular humans can see. But they're so compartmentalized they can't tell the upper ones that no, your paradigm is wrong, and if you look at it this way, look at the marvelous opportunities that are available to us. In other words, if you're out there fighting with somebody and you how do I want to put it this way, and you don't realize that the mat is three-dimensional, you're going to make a whole lot of moves that will quickly get you into a bind, and you'll continue to bind yourself fighting in a two-dimensional world. And as soon as you open your mind to the idea of three-dimensional potential, then you have an entirely new realm of action that's possible to you. Now, this, I think, is what